Okay, we're ready.
Tell me when.
We're good. Here we go.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Tri-State Facebook Live. My name is Donnie Lester, and I'm the Vice President of Safety and Security for Tri-State Motor Transit. Just give you a little bit of background about myself. I started to work here in 1980, August the 1st, as a driver, and I successfully drove over 1 million accident-free safe driving miles. And after that, I decided to do something different, so I had an opportunity to come into the office, and I started out doing recruiting and training, and then I got into the safety department, and here I am in the safety department. So what we're going to talk about today is hazardous waste manifest. We seem to be having some issues with the hazardous waste manifest, and that's basically all I'm going to cover is the manifest itself. I'm not going to get into the waste streams or waste codes or placarding of the loads. We can do all that in another setting at some time. So whenever we talk about hazardous waste, first it starts out as a hazardous material. So what is a hazardous material? Well, it's a material or a substance that the Secretary of Transportation has determined poses a risk to the environment, to our health, or to property when transporting commerce. So basically, hazardous waste is kind of the same thing. It's a material that's been used, and now it's no longer feasible to use it as a material, so it becomes a waste. So this waste is determined to pose a risk as well, or have capabilities of being harmful to our health or to the environment if we let it spill out into the environment. So when did this all come about on regulating hazardous waste? Actually, the EPA came together in 1976 and determined that something must be done to control the waste, because prior to that, industry or municipalities were just doing whatever they wanted to with the hazardous waste. So Congress enacted what they call a Resource Conservation Recovery Act in 1976, and that was the very beginning of hazardous waste. So part of that act was the EPA had control over this waste now to track it from cradle to grave. And the way of tracking it from cradle to grave was with the manifest, the hazardous waste manifest, which is the shipping papers for hazardous waste. So the hazardous waste manifest identifies the generator, which in the hazardous material world, that is the shipper, and also the facility and the transporter, and then it also describes the material. So this manifest is what we're going to talk about today. It's called an 8700-22 form, and then the continuation sheet is an 8700-22A form. So we're going to go over the hazardous waste manifest, and we're going to focus in on the manifest itself, and I'm going to walk you through the 20 different areas of the manifest that must be filled out. You, as a driver, is not required to fill out all 20 of these areas. What you are required is to enter the information about the transporter along with the EPA number, because anybody that's dealing with hazardous waste will be on the EPA ID number, and that's always a 12-digit or 12 characters, I should say, and usually starts out with the abbreviations of the state that you're in, and then it's either a designated number or it's a temporary number, and then a bunch of numbers after that. So, but it's always 12 characters. So when we look at the hazardous waste manifest that we focus in on right now, you'll notice in block 1 is the generator's ID number. So the generator is the shipper. Okay, in the hazardous waste industry, we call them generators. That's who generated the waste. So in that block would be their EPA ID number, which if they were from Missouri, it would be MOD and then 9 numbers after that. Block 2 of this manifest is page 1 of. That's very important for you to know, because page 1 of how many? If there's page 1 of 5, then you need to make sure as a transporter that there's 4 continuation sheets with this manifest. Or if it's page 1 of 1, then that's all you'll get. So that's very important. Also, block 3 is emergency response phone number. That is not Tri-State's phone number. The emergency response phone number is the phone number that the generator or the facility has designated will provide emergency response information to the transporter or to the facility or to the generator in case of an incident or accident. That's the one that's going to respond to the emergency. Block 4 is the manifest tracking number. Remember I said earlier that this was tracked from cradle to grave? Well, That's one way of tracking it. They keep track of these manifest tracking numbers, and that way they keep they know where the waste is at all times. If it's in the shipping mode, if it's in the transportation mode, or if it's actually at the facility or where it's at. So then we go down to block 5 of the manifest, and that's the generator's name and mailing address. Now it doesn't say site address; it says mailing address. So that's the people, that's the business that's created the waste, and you'll see their information there. But next to that, you'll see generator site address. Now this is where you're going to pick the waste up at. And if it's the same as the mailing address, then a lot of times you'll just see the word same on there, and they'll leave it as such. We go to block 6, transporter number 1, company name. If Tri-State's the transporter, then you would see Tri-State Motor Transit Co. Unless we are in Arkansas, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or South Carolina, then you will see Bedrock Inc., DBA, TSMT, CO. So that's kind of the difference there on the transporter's name. Also in that same block, when you go over to the right, you'll see the US EPA ID number. And Tri-State's number is ILMO because we're in Missouri. D, it's a designated number, 0-950-38998. We give that information in class, and we ask you to write it on the front page of your red Handling Hazardous Material book. But if you cannot remember that number when you're picking up hazardous waste, please give us a call. We can share that information with you. Block 7 says transporter number 2's company name. Again, if we're transporter 2, we're not transporter 1, but we are transporter 2. That is where you'll see Tri-State Motor Transit Co. Not TSMT, not Tri-State. It must be Tri-State Motor Transit Co. It has to be the way our permits are. Our permits basically dictate how this has to be filled out. And again, over to the right is the US EPA ID number of transporter number 2. Moving on down to block 8 is the designated facility's name and site address. Okay, that's where you're going to deliver the waste. And it has to be the site. Always make sure you have the to try if you need directions into their facility or whatever. So going down to block 9, 9A is the hazardous material. That's where you put an X or put RQ, or sometimes it's just left blank. 9B is the description of the material that you're transporting. And I know it says proper shipping name, hazard class ID number, and packing group. Well, we all know that now the proper shipping name or USDOT description starts out with the ID number, in other words, the UN number, and then it goes to the proper shipping name and hazard class and packing group if applicable. And you notice there's also four blocks there for where you can list 4 different wastes, 4 separate wastes in there. So that's what this is the responsibility of the generator to do this, unless they've hired a third party to fill out the manifest for them. But this is not the transporter's responsibility to fill that out, because we do not know what they're shipping until that information is on there, and then we know. Block 10 says container number. So of course that's how many packages or drums or whatever it may be that we're picking up. And then on type of containers, the EPA has said, okay, depending on the type of container as to the abbreviations that you must use. So we have them written down over here. As far as block 10 on type of containers, a BA is a burlap, cloth, paper, or plastic bag. A CF is a fiber, plastic box, carton, or cases. CM is a metal box, carton, or cases. CW is wooden boxes, carton, cases. CY is a cylinder. DF is fiberboard or plastic drums. DM, metal drums. DW, wooden drums. TP, portable tank, and a TT, cargo tank. The main ones that we transport are the metal drums, the fiber drums, portable tanks. So this is the correct abbreviations. This is the only abbreviations you can use for the type of packaging that we're going to be transporting. So when we look at block 11 of the hazardous waste manifest, block 11 is the total quantity. That's very important for us to know the total quantity, because you're going to use that to placard your load. So block 11 must be filled out with total quantity. Again, the generator is going to have to identify that information for us. In block 12 is the unit weight / volume. Again, there's abbreviations for that as well, and we have them over here. For the abbreviations for the unit, G is gallons, K kilograms, L liters, M metric tons, Y cubic yards, P pounds, T tons. And I'll give you an example I've seen on manifest. For pounds they'd put LBS. Cannot do that. According to the regulations, you have to put P for pounds. And of course, kilograms is another popular one that I see. And if we're transporting PCBs, which is polychlorinated biphenyls, it has to be listed in kilograms. Okay, we go back to the manifest. And in block 13, we have waste codes or waste streams. And the only thing I'm going to say about that is whenever the generator is identifying what type of waste it is, that is very important to them. So the main thing we know is if we see waste, if we see numbers there like D001, D002, D003, or we see U numbers or P numbers, then that identifies that it's a certain type of waste. To give you an example, if we were transporting some waste flammable liquids, you'd see a waste stream of D001, which means the unlisted hazardous waste characteristics of ignitability. So again, it's up to the generator to enter that information on the manifest, not up to us. Block 14 of the manifest would be any special handling instructions and any additional information that we may need to know, such as the type of PPE required to handle the material, or if there's any other special handling instructions. In block 15 is the generator or offers certification. And this block 15 is where the generator of the waste is telling us that, hey, this has all been properly packaged, properly marked, properly labeled, properly described, and it's ready to be shipped. So the generator is going to print or type their name on here, and then they'll sign it, and then they'll put the month, day, and year. Okay, so block 16 is for international shipments, which on hazardous waste we don't do a whole lot of international shipments, but if we do, then that must be checked off, import to U.S. or export to U.S., and then the port of entry and the date leaving the U.S. must be entered on this manifest. Block 17 is the transporter acknowledgement of receipt of material. So again, if we are transporter number 1, then in block 17 under transporter number 1 is where we print our name, then we sign our name, and then we put the month, day, and year. If we are transporter number 2, in other words on block 7 of the manifest, then we print our name, sign our name, and date it. And talking about signing the hazardous waste manifest, only a representative of Tri-State has to sign this manifest. So I know teams are used to signing a 1907 form. Both team members sign it. That's not the case with a hazardous waste manifest. Only one member has to sign it. One driver, that's all you got to have. And if another transporter picks it up and another driver for Tri-State picks it up, then that driver does not have to sign the manifest because a driver for Tri-State's already signed it. So I'll hit that again here in a minute. Block 18 is discrepancy. If there's any discrepancies when you're trying to deliver this waste, that is where they'll indicate what it is, what's wrong. That's for the facility to determine. And then on block 18B, the facility that was supposed to receive the waste may tell us, look, take this to an alternate facility, and at that time they will enter that information on the manifest and write the USEP ID number of that facility to where we're supposed to take it, and then we go on with it. If not, then sometimes they'll say return it to generator, so we return it to the generator on the same manifest, and they'll fill out block 18B, and then they'll be signed in block 18C. Block 19 is the codes for hazardous waste report management. We're not going to have to worry too much about that. And then in block 20 is where the designated facility owner or operator actually prints their name, signs the manifest, and puts the month, day, and year. So that's the EPA Form 8700-22. When we look at the EPA Form 8700-22A, this is known as a continuation sheet. And when you look at this continuation sheet, block 25 and 26, transporter blank, company name, transporter blank, company name. Okay, whenever we looked at the original 8700-22, there was only room for 2 transporters to be listed on that manifest. So if we're the third transporter or fourth transporter or fifth or sixth, whatever the case may be, in other words, more than 2 transporters had their hands on this waste already, then in block 25 is where we put our information, or block 26. And then you would sign this manifest down in block 33 as well, or block 34, depending on if we're transporter 3 or transporter 4 on this manifest. Now, if the shipper is using this manifest to describe additional material, so the shipper is going to fill out block 27A, 27B, 28, 29, and 30 and 31 to describe additional material. And if we're transporter 1 or 2, you have already signed for this waste by signing the original 8700-22. So you would not have to sign the continuation sheet, because the continuation sheet is only being used to describe additional material. So in saying that, remember there's only 2 times a continuation sheet is used: to list additional transporters, more than 2, or to describe additional materials. In other words, more than 4 waste materials that the generator is shipping. Okay, now we have a manifest that is completely filled out, and this manifest, as you can see, it's got all the required information on it. Like I said, block 1, it's got all the required information. That's a New Hampshire generator, so the generator's ID number starts with NH. D, it's a designated number or designated letter, and then 9 numbers after that. And then it's page 101, emergency response phone number, the tracking number, the information of where the generator's mailing address, the generator's site address. Clean Harbors was the first transporter, Tri-State, and the driver filled this information out, Tri-State Motor Transit Co. Then he put our EPID number on there, MODO 950-38998. Then they go on down, and I've marked out some names to protect the innocent. So transporter 1 was for Clean Harbors, transporter 2 was Tri-State. So this manifest here is filled out correctly. This is the way it's supposed to be. Then we go over here to this manifest, and this one's filled out correctly as well. And you will notice that the first transporter is Clean Harbors Environmental Service. The second transporter is Bedrock Inc., DBA, TSMT, CO. So that's correct. That's okay that it's filled out like that, because I mentioned earlier, Arkansas, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, South Carolina, and Massachusetts is also on board with putting our name like that. And they can do that. That's fine. Our permit there says Bedrock Inc., so they wanted to say Bedrock Inc., DBA, TSMT, CO, and then our EPID number. Now the next manifest that I'm going to show you, when you look at transporter number 2, TSMT, and we're seeing a lot of these. This is not correct. This is where the EPA is going to come back to us and say, you did not list your company name correctly according to your US EPA ID number. So in time, we will have to correct these manifests. So TSMT is not the correct way of doing it. Again, it has to be spelled out. Now what I want to show you on this next manifest is transporter 2 was Bedrock Inc., DBA, TSMT, CO, and that's really good. That's an excellent job. But for some reason, we listed a bunch of additional information right here, and which makes it hard to figure out what this first line is of what you've got. So do not write on the face of this manifest. If you're going to annotate something on this manifest, either do it in block 14 or do it at the very top. In the body of the manifest, do not write any information, because we have to be able to read it. And the customer called us on this, and they were a little bit upset. Now also, one thing I want to point out on this manifest is we're transporter 2, so we've already listed ourselves as transporter 2, and then we'd signed it as transporter 2. But for some reason, we came over here on the continuation sheet and put Tri-State Motor Transit and listed our EPID number, and then we signed it. There was no reason to do that, because this continuation sheet was only used to list additional material, as you can see in block 27B, 28, 29, and 30, and 31. Okay, so a couple of things that I want to highlight on this hazardous waste manifest is if there's more than 2 transporters, then a continuation sheet has to be used. If there's more than 4 line items listed, then a continuation sheet has to be used. The transporter will be Tri-State Motor Transit Co., or it will be Bedrock Inc. doing business as TSMT CO. And then, of course, our EPID number is not going to change. It's always going to be MO. It's a designated number here in Missouri, MOD 095038998. Okay, so having said that, that was pretty quick talking about the manifest, so I'm sure you have some questions about the manifest. And that's what we're talking about today, is strictly the hazardous waste manifest. That's the shipping document that DOT, Department of Transportation, has determined that must be used to ship hazardous waste. So we have to comply with DOT, in other words, 172.200 section of the 49 CFR. And in addition to that, we have to comply with the EPA, which is the 40 CFR Part 262, to make sure that we have this hazardous waste manifest filled out correctly.
We have a question from Melissa Metcalf. She said, can we go over company names again? Which states do we use DBA? And isn't that
Sure.
what this is over here?
Yes, Melissa, right here it
Okay.
is. Tri-State Motor Transit Company is the correct name, unless Arkansas, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, South Carolina. And then it's Bedrock Inc. doing business as TSMTCO. Good question.
Let's see. Lisa Brandon says, are they O's or zero? It makes a huge difference, and EPA DOT will fine if not correct.
MO for Missouri, abbreviations for Missouri, D0950, that's why I put the hash marks, 38998.
Okay. Okay, he answered that. No more questions right now.
And if you think of a question later, you can always call me. My extension is 2658, or you can send me a text message, or you can send me an email, or whatever. Also, you can get a hold of Andy Bradford or Jake Dooling. That's our two trainers, and they can help you with this information as well. So anytime you have a doubt about a hazardous waste manifest, please give us a call, because we are having some issues with them. We're not filling them out correctly. And another thing that we're doing is we'll sign the very first one, and you and I both know sometimes there's 50, 60 copies of these manifests. So we have to sign every one of them. We have to put our name as a transporter on every one of them. That's required to be on there. Continuation sheets listing additional materials, we do not have to put our name on that one, but the rest of them we do. So along with our USEP ID number. So sometimes you get writer's cramps.
And then did we want to highlight the book that everyone has?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So if you've been through training in Joplin, you would have a handling hazardous material book. Okay? In this handling hazardous material book, starting on page, in my book, it's 445. It may be different in a newer version. You'll have information about hazardous waste. And the good thing about this is if you forget about these types of containers or these abbreviations for the unit of measure, it's right here in this book. So there's a lot of information in here about hazardous waste, and right over here is where it gets into the different waste streams or waste codes. So in your spare time, read this. And if you have any questions after you read it, please give me a shout. I'll be glad to answer them.
All right. Thanks so much, Donnie.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys.